Building a business is easier than it seems. It is just about mastering those fundamental business principles, implementing systems, and developing a resilient mindset. Welcome back to the Entrepreneur to Employer podcast. With downloads in over 19 countries, the Entrepreneur to Employer podcast is quickly becoming the go-to podcast for increasing profit margins while reclaiming your time. I am your host, Brian Montes. Now, I've been an entrepreneur for over 10 years, and I'm currently the CEO of a boutique audit and advisory firm with 10 employees. My team is so well-oiled that I can go on vacation for 2 weeks and our business will continue to function normally, if not even better. Now, before embarking on my entrepreneurial journey, I spent the first chapter of my career learning about sales, operations, and leadership in the Fortune 500 world. So I understand firsthand the challenges of going from being a W-2 employee to a business owner. Now, for you, it doesn't matter whether you're a manufacturing company, a brick and mortar business, or an online business owner. I have the experience with all of these different companies and the framework to get you more clients, increase your profits, optimize your team, and give you 25% of your time back. So if you're ready, let's get started. So what we're going to talk about today, this is the first podcast of the year for 2025. Happy New Year, by the way. I'm going to talk about, over the next few episodes, some of the highest risk things that continue to happen in small and medium-sized businesses that really do jeopardize your business. You've got to remember that there's a lot of risks out there, and some of the risks we can't control. Some of the geopolitical risks, some of the national security risks. There's things that we cannot control in our business. They're out there and we face them, but we can't do a whole lot about them. And then there's risks in our business that we can control. And those are the ones, as a business owner, you need to be functioning and focusing on, looking at the risks that you can control and doing everything you can to eliminate, if not reduce them. So today we're going to talk about bottlenecks and why you as a business owner need to stop being the bottleneck in your own business. Right? Because this is something that many business owners face, especially as you start to grow. I mean, the good news is that once you identify the bottlenecks and you start to take action, you're going to start to free up your time. And you'll see that as you free up your time, you're going to, empower your team. They're going to get enthused and excited, and you're going to position your business for exponential growth at this point in time. As long as you continue to bottleneck the business, you're going to have a hard time with that growth. You will still grow, but that growth is going to come much more painfully, with a lot more friction. It's going to be a lot harder to grow because of that bottleneck scenario. So we're going to go through that today. And by the end of this episode, you're going to have a clear roadmap for how to remove yourself as the bottleneck and shift from doing it all by leading with intention. So let's start first by, how do we identify the bottleneck? Right? In business, a bottleneck is any point where progress slows down because everything needs to flow through you. Now, if this sounds familiar, this is where you're really going to want to pay attention. Is your business currently being run where every single decision has to go through you? So here's 4 questions you can ask yourself to see if you're the bottleneck. Number 1, do decisions get delayed because the team is waiting for your input? In other words, they message you, they email you, they hit you up on Slack, they hit you up on Teams with a question about something. Hey, can we implement this piece of software? Or, whatever the question is, because they don't have the power or the authority to implement a particular decision. So they run everything through you, and you're busy, right? You're getting a lot of questions. You have to run the business. You have life going on. And so your inbox or your Slack or your team starts to get backed up, and you're not responding to these questions that your team is asking you. So they're waiting for your input on something that they probably should be able to execute on their own if the structure was put in place. And because that structure is not in place, the decision gets delayed because it sits in your inbox and it takes you a week to 2 weeks to get back to them. So decisions getting delayed slows down growth and progress. It also frustrates your team. The second question you need to ask yourself to determine if you are indeed the bottleneck is, are you constantly answering questions that others should handle? Right? If every single question comes to you, there's a problem, right? Your team, you hire them for a reason. People on your team should be able to answer certain questions, and they shouldn't have to run everything up the flagpole. But if you see every question coming to you, number 1, it's a distraction to you throughout your day. It takes up time. And again, your employees should be empowered to answer those questions. The third question you need to ask yourself as to determine whether or not you're the bottleneck is, do tasks or project pile up because you're trying to do too much yourself? Do you feel like you're constantly underwater? Do you feel like you cannot get away from the business, that you can't take vacation time, you can't take a day off, and you've just got tasks and projects that are piling up that aren't getting finished, right? So you have that open-ended to-do list that it is just getting larger and larger. right? If that's the case, then chances are you're a bottleneck. And the fourth question you want to ask yourself is, do you feel like you have to be involved in everything to ensure quality or consistency? If you answer yes to this question, then that means that there is somewhere in your organization, the delegation process is either hasn't been established or it's broken, one of the two. And you're going to have to fix that because you cannot be involved in everything as your company grows. Now, that doesn't mean you can't keep a pulse on stuff. It doesn't mean you can't put in frameworks to make sure that quality control is there, consistency is there, and things of that nature. But to be involved in the day-to-day details of every single thing that occurs in your company gets harder and harder as your company gets larger. So you're going to have to put into effect the framework so that delegation occurs, the roadmap is there, the rules of engagement are there so that your team knows what they can do and can't do, and have your checks and balances in place, of course. And the only way you're going to get back 25% of your time from your business is to make sure you're not involved in every minute little detail. So take a moment and reflect on your daily and your weekly tasks. And this is where oftentimes when I start coaching a business owner, the first thing we do is we do a time study. For the first couple of weeks, we strictly look at where are you spending your time, because we can't focus on getting you 25% of your time back unless we know exactly where you're spending your time. Because once that time study is done, we get a snapshot of how you're spending your time, how you're spending your days, how you're spending your week. And from there, we're able to start determining what the team looks like, where the strengths on the team are, what the job descriptions are, what the expectations are, and how do we start to take some of those things off your plate, maybe some of those lower value things that it would be better for somebody else to do, or things that you actually aren't that good at or you don't love doing, and somebody else on your team would actually do exponentially better, and we really should have them doing that in the first place. So that's oftentimes how our relationship starts when we start coaching a business owner. Is we start with that time study, because we've got to know where you're at today and create that baseline in order to figure out our strategy to get you 25% of your time back. But once you figure out, if there's things on that timesheet that would halt if you took a week off, those are your bottlenecks, right? So as you do your time study and as you look at what's going on, if there are things that would absolutely make your business come to a screeching halt because you wanted to be out for a couple of weeks, that's a first starting point to identify what your bottlenecks are. Now, why do bottlenecks happen? Well, being a bottleneck usually comes from a place of care and control, right? As business owners, we want everything to run smoothly. And we should. And even as our business grows, we should always have that philosophy. We want things to run smoothly. We want our customers and our clients to be happy. We want our employees to be happy, right? So that care and control shouldn't go away just because we get busy. I mean, look, a lot of the big enterprise level companies have certainly lost that high level touch and care. I don't know about you, but my frustration with cable companies is at an all-time high, right? I get a couple of options. I can either have Spectrum or I can have Frontier. And, it's really boils down to picking the lesser of two evils, which company is going to give us a little bit better service. And, so that care and control doesn't have to get lost just because your company gets bigger. And I would certainly hope that that is something that as a business owner, you would want to maintain. But when you've built that business from the ground floor up, it does feel natural that you're going to want to oversee every single detail, right? Because this is your livelihood. You've put everything into the business. This is how you're going to create your financial freedom. This is your retirement plan. This is your family's legacy. So it's natural to want to oversee every detail. But the reality is that what got you here today will not get you to the next level. When you start getting to 2, 3, 4, 5 million in top line revenue and you start to increase that profitability, it becomes very difficult for you to be involved in every single detail. Holding on to too much responsibility is going to absolutely limit your business's ability to grow, and it's going to cause you to burn out. And if you can't scale, if everything has to go through you, it absolutely cannot happen. So bottlenecks will prevent your company from scaling and growing. Again, you will still grow, but there'll be a lot of friction in the process. There will be frustrated employees. You'll increase your turnover. You'll frustrate customers. There are a lot of symptoms in a business that we can see when a bottleneck occurs because the business owner is the bottleneck. So the next question that we want to ask and answer is, how do you break free from being the bottleneck, right? That's the $1 million question. So let's go through a couple paths and solutions that you can utilize. I'm going to give you 4 actionable steps that you can take to stop being the bottleneck in your business. And again, Simple, not easy, right? So it sounds simple on paper, but the act of unbottlenecking yourself and getting out of the way takes a little bit of time. It requires a mindset shift. It requires a strategic plan. It's going to require some training, some delegation. There are steps that have to happen, and it doesn't happen overnight. But as we are now in the first quarter of 2025, this would be a great thing for you to focus on in the first quarter, is making sure that you are not the bottleneck for your organization, especially if you have the foundation in place to grow. So here's your 4 actionable steps. Here's where you want to make sure you have pen and paper handy so you can write these down. First and foremost, audit your tasks and responsibilities. Start by making a list of everything you do in a week. And if you do different things over a couple weeks, then I would say make your time study 2 weeks long. You need to determine how long your time study needs to be, but it needs to be a minimum of a week. Highlight the tasks that could be delegated or systematized. Remember, just because you could do something better doesn't mean you should be doing it. Number 2, empower your team with clear roles and authority. Ensure your team members know their roles and their responsibilities and give them the authority to make decisions within their scope. Empower them to take ownership and let them know that mistakes are part of the growth. So you're going to have to allow for some mistakes during this process, and mistakes are going to occur throughout the entire life cycle of the business and throughout the entire life cycle of an employee. The problem is when we have mistakes that are made over and over that are the same mistakes, then we have a problem. But you're going to have to accept the fact that some mistakes are going to happen. The goal is to make sure that you can foresee to the best of your ability what mistakes could happen and what will the cost of those mistakes be to the company. This way you can put some guardrails up around the decision-making process to try and limit the impact of mistakes that will occur. But definitely in order for you to get out of the way and open up the bottleneck, you're going to have to, sit down with each team member, make sure they're very clear on their role, and also let them know what decisions they can make without you, right? They've got to know, I can decide this. I've got the authority to spend up to $1,000 on this, or, right, set up the framework so that they know clearly what they can do and what they can't do. Number 3, create repeatable systems. Systems are absolutely the backbone of scalability. Without systems, you will not be able to scale your business. So document your processes for recurring tasks. Once you have that done, you can facilitate delegation and ensure that you have consistency in your business operations, right? So when you have a process-driven thing within your operation, you can map it out. I'll give you a great example. I was talking with my team this morning, and we do something that's called a shield model validation. And the shield model validation is a process of validating a piece of software that the banks and credit unions use. So it's a very linear process for us, right? So our auditor goes in and goes from A to Z within the software. We need to create training on this because we had an issue where one of our team members that was very skilled in doing this particular audit left the company. And we hadn't cross-trained anybody else to pick up the task, to pick up that audit. And so we've closed that skills gap now. The team's gotten the training they need, and we've closed that skills gap. But in order for us to make sure that we never have that problem again, we are writing the training for how to do this audit so that we can easily spin up and train other people without losing any downtime the next go around. So you've got to create the repeatable systems. You've got to document your processes. You've got to write the SOPs, and you've got to create the trainings. It is absolutely necessary in order for you to grow. And number 4, this comes from me without a doubt, because I spent most of my life being a perfectionist, but you've got to let go of perfectionism, right? This is probably one of the most challenging parts, but you got to understand done is better than perfect. There is no such thing as perfection. Your team will not do everything exactly the way you would, and that's okay. The way you need to look at something getting completed is, you may go from A to Z. Well, let's just say, okay, let's use a different analogy. We're going to go from LA to New York. There's multiple ways to drive from LA to New York. There's more than one highway out there. The way you choose to go from LA to New York may not be the same way that your employee chooses to drive from LA to New York. But at the end, you both get to New York at the end of the day. It may take your employee a week longer, but they still get there. So focus on those end results, focus on, what the end result needs to look like instead of how they get there. Focus on that big picture. And ultimately, you're going to have to trust the people that you've hired to handle these details. And if they're the wrong people, well, then you've got to deal with that as well. But as long as you've hired the right people, they should be able to do the tasks that you assign them. So, you think about this and you go through all this work to start removing bottlenecks and going through the pain and suffering as a business owner to remove yourself from being the bottleneck. And you ask yourself, what is the benefits of me removing myself from being a bottleneck? Well, you will start to see over time some amazing things are going to start to happen with your business. Your team's going to become a lot more confident and capable. Why? Because they know you trust them. Trusting your team and allowing them to do their job to the fullest and a little bit more, that is going to make them confident. It's going to make them capable, and you're going to be able to see what else they're capable of. So it's a win-win. You're able to see what they can do and where they might be able to go. They're able to show you what they can do, and hopefully they'll get some professional development out of this as well. You'll see projects moving faster and your business gaining momentum. Again, going back to what we talked about in the beginning, right? If every question has to go through you or every approval for everything has to go through you, and you start getting bogged down and unable to answer in a timely manner, you're not going to gain momentum, right? Business moves very quickly. So if you are able to set up SOPs and criteria where your team has some autonomy to make decisions and move faster, you're going to see projects moving quicker and you're going to see your business gaining momentum. Next, you're going to get time back to focus on strategic growth rather than day-to-day operations, right? I mean, everybody hears the old saying, work on your business, not in your business. And the reality is that's not 100% true. You have to work in your business and you have to work on your business. As business owners, we have to do both. We can't just do one or the other. If you spend all your time in the business, then you're not working on strategy and different ideas to continue growing the business. If all you're doing is working on the business, then you're going to miss a lot of important day-to-day details that you still need to be involved in as a business owner. So the goal here is that, with removing yourself as a bottleneck and creating that delegation strategy, you get back 25% of your time. That 25% of your time, you're able to put back into the business working on it instead of in it. And that is very valuable time. So once you start to get back that time, it pulls you out of the day-to-day operations for, a percentage of the week, and it allows you to work on growing the business. And then perhaps most importantly, you're going to start to build that life and business that you've envisioned, where your business is not eating you alive and not consuming you. And that's really what you want, because if your business is consuming you, then all you've done is create a job for yourself and you have not created a business that you can ultimately sell. So with that, here's your challenge for the week. Implement one of these steps that we discussed today. It could be delegating a task, documenting a process, or it could be just starting with your time study. Sit down and do a time study of your week and start and see where you're spending your time and document. And if you need assistance on creating your time study, just send me an email. Email will be in the show notes. I've got a template for the time study, and I'm happy to help you kick that off. And just remember, stepping out of the bottleneck isn't just about growing your business. It's about you growing as a leader. All right. Well, that wraps up this first episode of the year. Thanks for joining me on the Entrepreneur to Employer podcast. If you found value in today's conversation, do me a favor, subscribe, like the podcast, send me a review, and hopefully you give us 5 stars. Also share it with another business owner who you think might need to hear this. And again, don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep building business and do it on your terms. All right. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.